Hello and welcome to Pluribus Unum's Fireside Chats. Not as good as FDR's, but hey, it's something. Now, this episode is going to be one of those ones where I think the news is going to overshadow the main topic. But the main topic I think is important. Obviously, I would not be making a video if I didn't think it was at least somewhat important. But we'll get to that when we get to that. But first, let's get right into the news. First, I'm going to give you an update on a Latin American country, Chile. Things are not looking so hot. Let me explain. In the Chilean polls right now, in the 3 weeks before the election, at least the first round of the election takes place, Jose Cast has steadily risen. And when I say steadily risen, I don't mean he's gotten a decent margin, which he has grown a lot since the last time we've talked about this topic. But he has gotten to the point where he is poised to not only beat Boric in the first round, but is also tying with Boric in the runoff. Now, I originally put this on when there was this huge jump for him, but as I'm recording this, the polls have steadily re-shifted, so now Cast is a little bit under Boric, or at the very least his margin is shortening. But that's because a lot of people pointed out to the fact that now that Cast is being considered very serious, people are scrutinizing him a lot more, so there's a chance that he's not going to be that popular. And I've mentioned before that Cast is not that popular outside of his hardcore base. Aside from the far right in Chile, he really is not popular. When the runoff happens, there's a good chance that a lot of the people of the other parties are going to shift to Boric. Provoste and MEO, their voters are more likely going to shift to Boric. Artez's voters, it might be 50-50, but then again, Artez isn't going to get that many voters anyways. Sichel? I don't know. Sichel and Parisi? I don't know. I don't think enough information has been looked into the two. But there's a chance that they'll probably, a majority of the voters of those two candidates might sit out a second round. But there will be, of course, a sizable margin that may end up voting for Cast. But here's the thing. I bring this up not because of just that. The polls would be a bad enough number. But Boric has tested positive for COVID-19, and he will be unable to campaign for at least a decent bit of the remaining 3 weeks of the campaign. And in Latin American countries, there's a certain point where the campaign literally just stops. I think the week of the election, they literally just shut off all the candidates' websites. I don't know if that was the case for Chile, but that was the case for Mexico. They essentially just shut everything down so that people don't campaign on election day. And I bring this up again, not just because of this, but also because this is proof of something that I've been saying. This is the true test if the pink tide is returned. The pink tide, I'll be making a video about it pretty soon. Well, two, technically. But I'll be making videos about them pretty soon. But the pink tide, as we know, they've had a bit of time periods where they've gone up, and they have time periods where they go down. They shot up really high in the early 2000s. They shot low in the late 2010s. And now they're shooting back up. Oh, no. They shot up during the early 2000s. They shot down in the early 2010s. They shot a little bit back up in the early 2010s. Not early 2010s, the late 2010s. And early 2021. AMLO, Alberto Fernandez, Arce, Castillo. But those elections are essentially nothing. Well, they're not nothing. AMLO winning in Mexico was a huge win for the pink tide. Arce winning after they deposed Morales was a decent win for the pink tide. And even Castillo, even though he's been shifting a little bit to the right, I don't know if that's going to tell a lot of things about his future ambitions. But it is fair to say that he was a good shift to the pink tide as well. But this one is going to be the biggest test because this Chile, of course, Chile is the embodiment of almost everything the pink tide hates. Authoritarianism, neoliberalism, fascism. This is it. And on the cusp of the creation of the new constitution as well, This is literally make or break for the pink tide. And I'll even go so far as to say that this could potentially shift potential, like, Lula supporters. Because, like, if Cast wins this election, Bolsonaro will, of course, take that as a victory, and then he'll be like, hooray, me and Cast, la 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 la. And that might boost morale for his causes. But if Boric wins, Lula's going to get a huge bump in Brazil, because, you know, they're going to be like, the pink tide is back. What better man to usher in the resurgence of the pink tide than one of its leaders? So yeah, despite the fact that nobody's talking about Chile, I'm going to keep talking about Chile 100%, because Chile's elections are truly just, this is it. This is truly a big testament of the pink tide's power, and I'm here for it. So anyways, now let's move on to the next story. This story is kind of a meme story. Not a meme story, but it's a meme for the channel, because if you follow me if you go to my Discord server, you'll know that there's a punching bag that we've had, and the punching bag is continuing to punch, like be punched. Aaron Coleman, remember him? He was the guy who, like, leaked his girlfriend's nudes and was abusive to her. Yeah, well, it turns out he's going to jail for domestic violence. How? Aaron Coleman? He abused someone? How dare he? In reality, this is very expected, and I'm really hoping that this is the true end of his political career. Though, knowing America, it won't be. Granted, like, and I'll say this is funny. This is actually kind of funny. Aaron Coleman, his incumbent representative, Stan Fraunfelter, actually initiated a write-in bid for Coleman, and as you can tell, that's probably an indication of something that we're going to be talking about in this episode. But I'll say this. If they had done this, if this huge thing was actually done for him and not someone else, then I would have been supportive of it 100%. Why couldn't this one have worked? So anyways, the next story we're going to be talking about Jared Polis, who turns out is a huge idiot, and I don't like him anymore. After the brief, 3 minutes that I liked him, I don't like him anymore. Because Jared Polis is, he's definitely not a real progressive of any sort. Jared Polis, it was revealed that Governor Jared Polis of Colorado paid little or no federal taxes for years. And that, according to this, he paid nothing in federal income taxes from 2013 to 2015 and paid an effective rate of 8.2 from 2010 to 2018, substantially lower than the 19% paid by a taxpayer who makes $45,000 in 2018. Now, he explains that the reason why is that he basically went through all the loopholes that he was legally allowed to go through. And it's like, yeah, and I don't like that at all. This isn't a good thing. And this guy is the guy who, endorsed one of Ilhan Omar's opponents. This is a guy who was literally part of the House Freedom Caucus. For those who don't know what the House Freedom Caucus is, it was a group of libertarian right-wing guys, and Jared Polis was a member of the caucus for some reason. Well, I mean, I guess we know the reason now, but essentially, Polis is not necessarily Polis stinks, and let's primary him. Anyways, now let's move on to the next story. You see, for the next four stories are going to kind of basically be on the same trend of election news, because elections just happened. Quite a couple of elections, as a matter of fact. First, we'll be starting off in the far-off land of Japan. Now, Japan, there was nothing really, remember when I did the episode of Japan? Yeah, literally nothing changed, essentially. The Liberal Democratic Party got 261 seats, and basically won an outright majority, even without any of their, support. They didn't need Kometo at all. And this essentially, many people say, is going to usher in a new era of, conservatism for Japan. I don't know if that's necessarily the case. Maybe it is. Probably it is. The opposition did fine, but the problem is that there wasn't, a central opposition. The opposition did kind of coalesce. Basically, they did the what's it called? I don't know what the strategy is called, but essentially the strategy of like some races they didn't run candidates so that other opposition candidates could easily win. What you're more concerned about, as I know you all are, is how the Japanese left did. Well, if you're a Constitutional Democratic supporter, they got 96 seats, which is alright, I guess. But again, 261 to 96, so not necessarily the best. The Communist Party got 10 seats. The Social Democratic Party got 1 seat. And the most interesting upset of the night was Reiwa Shinsengumi, who got 3 seats. I might say, that's not really that impressive. Well, for a new party, it kind of is. Especially considering this could potentially mean, like, further electoral successes down the line. So essentially, they got, like, a little over 100 seats, which is fine, I guess. It's not necessarily the best showing, but it is a showing. Now on to some American elections. And by some, I mean all, because there were a lot of elections that happened on November 2nd, and those showings are not necessarily the best for a lot of people. First, let's start off with the biggest one, the biggest quote-unquote loss of the night. Virginia, Terry McAuliffe lost against Glenn Youngkin. Now, I say the quote-unquote loss because I did not really care about this race at all. Like, I cared about the race when it was Lee Carter. When Lee Carter was running, that's when I cared. After that, I stopped caring. I endorsed Princess Blanding, and, but my endorsement of Princess Blanding isn't really, I'll be honest, I didn't care. I knew Princess Blanding wasn't going to win, so there was essentially no point in caring. The one thing Blanding did was that she got a notable showing, but also didn't get the spoiler effect thing. She didn't get enough of an effect to be claimed to be a spoiler. I tried to get Princess Blanding on the show. She didn't respond. I endorsed her. I publicly supported her. Granted, I didn't go to everybody and be like, "Oh, you should vote for Princess Blanding instead." But I didn't care about the race because the race had no meaning to me. McAuliffe was not going to win. Well, we didn't know if he was going to win at the time. But essentially, what happened was, a lot of things apparently happened. The way this race panned out was that essentially, McAuliffe ran a very terrible campaign and then got terrible results. As it always is, the corporate Democrat runs a terrible campaign, they don't know what they're doing, and then, of course, they blame other people. As I mentioned in a previous episode, the Lincoln Project even went so far as to try and do race baiting, and it didn't pan out. Apparently Youngkin's showing is actually so impressive that a lot of Republicans are actually trying to tap him for the presidency. Because Youngkin did a thing that very few Republicans thought was possible. Don't run to Trump, but keep the Trumpsters on standby. He ran a campaign that was essentially he wasn't anti-Trump and he wasn't pro-Trump. He basically was an agnostic on the issue. Basically the thing that I say Tim Scott or Nikki Haley were. They've said enough things that you could interpret it as they like Trump, or they said enough things to say that they hate Trump. But essentially, they towed the line. They teetered on the line, and nobody really noticed. The Trumpsters ran to support Youngkin. The anti-Trumpers went to support Youngkin. And it worked. And even some Democrats probably supported Youngkin. Because he also ran on the idea of since he wasn't adherently pro-Trump, he wasn't that thing. He wasn't able to deter a lot of the people who voted for Biden. That was one thing he did. He did try to get a bunch of the white suburbanites who voted for Biden. Not all of them, but of course, just enough to make a difference. And in this close race, he did make a difference. Now, of course, the narrative is that, he lost because of progressives, which is stupid. I keep calling this narrative stupid because they're if that were the case, why wouldn't the progressives lose? Every time they bring out this stupid narrative like, oh, they're losing because of progressives, it's like, well, then why don't the progressives lose? Like, all these Senate races in the 2018 election that they were like, oh, the progressives cost us this election. Well, no. Because the progressive senators, the progressive-leaning senators, they stay just fine. Sherrod Brown, he still managed to win re-election. Tammy Baldwin managed to win re-election. Bernie and Warren, granted those two are like in deep, safe states, but they won re-election just fine. In 2018, during the California, House races, they flipped, here's how many seats they flipped. They flipped Porter, they flipped Levin, they flipped Harder, they flipped Hill, they flipped TJ Cox, they flipped Harley Rauda, and they flipped the other one, Jill Cisneros. They flipped 7 seats that ran on Medicare for All type language. Then in the next election cycle, 3 of those representatives won re-election, and they were the lefty ones. The lefty representatives won re-election in these flip swing districts. The corporate conservative Democrats were the ones who lost. In this election cycle, we had two governors run for re-election. Phil Murphy and Terry McAuliffe. McAuliffe was the more centrist candidate, and he lost. Phil Murphy endorsed fucking Bernie Sanders' son for Congress, and he won by a slim margin. Progressives were not the ones who lost that race. This is the same stupid narrative that happens over and over and over again. The moderates will go to me and then complain when I talk about factors that cause progressive candidates to lose races. And then they will go on to say, oh, but it was the progressives that made this candidate lose. When it's like the progressives were not a factor in the race at all. You can't expect me to ignore all the actual legitimate things that happened in the cycle, and then you to go just pull it out of your ass and just go, oh, it was the progressives were the ones who lost this race that they literally had no reason to be a part of. Progressives were not even mentioned in this race at all. Voters in Virginia don't give a crap about what AOC is doing. They don't care because she's a congresswoman in New York. They are voting for leader of Virginia. There were people who were blaming the freaking Afghanistan withdrawal on this loss. Correlation do not mix. And progressives did really well in other races. They won the Cleveland mayoral race with Justin Bibb, and a lot of DSA candidates won their elections. But of course, oh no, the progressives were the big losers of the night. But let's talk about, I'm not going to say progressives overwhelmingly won. Because here's one race where we didn't win. The Buffalo mayoral race. 58% of voters wrote in a candidate. As of right now, we do not know who that candidate is, but we can take a wild guess and say that it was Byron Brown. I will say this, Byron Brown, you're stupid and you're an idiot, and no one likes you. If you campaign this hard in the primary, you wouldn't even need to waste people's time on the running candidacy. This is just, I hate this. Like everybody points out this fact, I don't want to hear anybody say blue no matter who ever again. And it's correct. Objective truth. And of course people are to crap on people. It's yeah, of course. This is the truth. This is true. I don't want to hear a single peep of blue no matter who when the freaking race was this race was literally the blue no matter who test. I mean, this race isn't specifically the blue no matter who test, but it always happens to be blue no matter who until it's a socialist or a progressive, in which case, who cares? These same moderates will literally sit there and go, yeah, but Joe Manchin, you have to support Joe Manchin because at the end of the day, he's keeping the Democratic majority. But then they'll turn around and be like, yeah, this writing candidacy for this guy who lost the Democratic primary, this is good. This is just so stupid. And it's just obvious double standards because you don't care about your actual principles. And this is just embarrassing. Speaking of embarrassing, I got a little bit embarrassed at the Florida 20 race because, oh boy, the Florida 20 race, now, technically I lost, but also technically I didn't lose. Yet, at least. Let me explain. See, the candidate I was backing in this race was Omari Hardy, a state representative who we all may remember had that famous viral rant that went on where he was like, we cut off people's electricity in the middle of a pandemic, and he's even in a thumbnail. But here's what happened instead. Omari Hardy got 5.9% of the votes. I might say, dang it, that means we must have lost, right? Well, not necessarily. You see, there was another candidate in the race that was a very interesting, figure. Sheila Cherfilus-McCormick. Now, Sheila, she's been in the sphere plenty of times. She's run against Alcee Hastings, the representative who used to hold the seat twice, and was the brand new Congress/Marianne Williamson endorsed candidate. Now, you might say, and she actually ran for this race first before Omari entered in. And I might say, why didn't I support her? Is it because I'm a sexist? Yes. If you want the actual reason, it's because Sheila was getting a lot of endorsements and support from people that I did not think should be in our field. I don't remember specifically if she got this specific endorsement, but she was endorsed by a person by the name of Christine Alvio. Alvio is essentially Nico House and that specific crowd's favorite candidate. So she was at the very least Nico House adjacent. So it's I don't know if I should support her. That's kind of sus. That's a little bit sus, man. But it turns out Sheila, no matter what happens next, Sheila was the overwhelmingly better candidate in retrospect. Sheila is currently leading the race by 3 votes. And this is after a recount where she was leading by 7. Essentially, she is very close to either being the representative or being second place. So, objectively, Sheila was the horse to back in this race. Now, there was one fact, and you might say, well, how? Omari was a decently well-known state representative, who had, of course, that viral rant, and he was projected by Data for Progress as the only progressive candidate that actually had a way to seal a path to victory in the race. With his name recognition, he should have easily won, right? Well, it turns out that we all overlooked one factor that I mentioned previously. Sheila is a perennial candidate. The people in that specific district already knew her name. They knew her for being on the ballot already. They knew that she had run for the race previously, and there's a good chance that they might have been inclined to vote for her anyways, but they were just Alcee's doing fine. I don't see any reason for him to be replaced. But then after Alcee died, they probably were well, Sheila is very clearly interested in the seat, and she's shown that she is a decent candidate, so we might as well vote for her. That is a factor that I think is very fair that I overlooked, but again, I probably should have seen that coming. But the thing is, the final results will not be verified until next week, so we'll have to wait to see whether or not Sheila will be the candidate, will be the representative, or not. Now, with that, we finally get to talk about the big thing that happened. The Bipartisan Infrastructure and Build Back Better plans. For those who don't remember, who don't, for some reason, have not been paying attention for the past couple of weeks, well, not even the past couple of weeks, the past months, essentially, we have been seeing a lot of debate and debacle over the Bipartisan Infrastructure Plan versus the Build Back Better plan. There's been a lot of negotiations. There's been a lot of debate. Manchin got in the news. The progressives got in the news. There was a lot of fighting and a lot of debate, a lot of debacles, and blah, blah, blah. All that jazz. But on November 5th, the fight was finally over. Pelosi decided that she was going to push for a vote on the infrastructure bill, and Biden said, I want the whole House to vote for it and the Build Back Better plan. And there was a last-minute push for progressives to be like, okay, guys, this is it. There was a huge debacle, like, this is it, guys. It's now or never. What are we going to do? What's going to happen? Like, because, again, one of the big things about this is that the progressives stated very clearly, we will vote for both things, but we will vote for the Build Back Better plan first, and then vote for this. That was their only stipulation. They would vote for both easily, but they would vote for the Build Back Better plan first. That way they could guarantee the Build Back Better plan gets voted on first. Like, if it passes, then they will vote no on the bipartisan infrastructure bill. But moderates did the same thing. They said, we will not vote on the Build Back Better plan until we vote on the bipartisan infrastructure bill. And even then, they didn't say, we'll vote yes on both. They just said, we'll vote on it. Even then, it was still essentially a maybe that they would vote for it. And when I say maybe, I mean essentially no. But as I said, Pelosi caved, and they voted on the infrastructure bill first, and the Build Back Better plan will be voted on, like, I think next week. Which is, I mean, they were supposed to vote on both on the 5th, but then what ended up happening was essentially they were like, oh, but we'll vote on the rules package to get the BBB moving forward, but then we'll adjourn for the night. It was the moment of truth. Now let me explain my personal feelings going into it. I 100% expected that a decent number of the Progressive Caucus would vote for it. I suspected that there would be maybe a couple that would vote against it because of the whole hold the line thing, try to get the BBB passed first, or maybe they would say that the bipartisan infrastructure plan just isn't enough. But essentially, I knew that for the most part, a lot of progressives were going to be voting for the BIF. Now, you may say, well, what does that mean? Are they frauds in your eyes? No, not necessarily. Because one thing is that I've seen, I've personally viewed that I saw them fight. I saw them try really hard to not only get the BBB passed first, but also fight against its watering down, holding the line for as long as they did. I've seen this. I saw them fight for it. I saw them fight, and I knew they were trying their best. But again, at the end of the day, progressives are, no matter how many progressives you think there are in the House, no matter if you think every member of the Progressive Caucus is progressive, or if you think like only 2 of them are, you know at the end of the day, progressives are outnumbered in the House. So the fact that they fought for as long as they did show that they not only had the backbone to try and do what needed to be done, but also that they were strong enough to maybe mount a potential other bid for a future bill. Does that mean I can't critique them? Of course not. But I'm explaining the broader plan, like the broader, not even the plan, like the broader idea behind it. And there were a lot of people who were doing speculation behind the scenes, like there were a lot of DM groups that were like, oh, who's going to vote for it? Who's going to vote against it? And I'm like, I'm not really in the business to care. Some people are going to vote for it, some people might vote against it. Maybe they'll all vote for it. I don't know. At the end of the day, this bill does not change who is considered a progressive in my eyes. Like, these guys, like, a person voting yes on this bill does not automatically make their support for Medicare for all go away or anything. Like how Kucinich voting for Obamacare doesn't mean that he didn't support single payer or anything like that. But I've been deliberating my personal stuff long enough. What happened? Well, the final vote was 228 to 206. What happened was that 13 Republicans flipped to support the BIF, and 6 Democrats flipped to oppose it. Here were the 13 Republicans that supported it: Don Bacon of Nebraska, Brian Fitzpatrick, Andrew Garbanto, Anthony Gonzalez, John Katko, Adam Kinzinger, Nicole Maliotakis, David McKinley, Tom Reed, Chris Smith, Fred Upton, Jeff Van Drew, and Don Young. Typical moderate Republicans, not really much surprise there. But of course, what most people were actually concerned about is 206, 6 Democrats. You know what that means. It is the squad. Jamal Bowman, AOC, Rashida Tlaib, Ilhan Omar, Ayanna Pressley, and Cori Bush all held the line. They voted against it. Am I disappointed that it wasn't like a little bit more? Like maybe there would. I thought at the very least there would have been like a Chewy Garcia or a, I don't know, maybe a. Yeah, I mean honestly, aside from Chewy Garcia or maybe Ro Khanna, I don't think there was anybody else who would have voted against it. So it's like I was hoping for maybe at least like 8 or maybe Barbara Lee. But at the end of the day, it's like, yeah, of course these guys voted. Of course the vote didn't end up happening like in that way. Now you might say, well, they voted nay. The Congressional Progressive Caucus in total did not do so hot, but the squad voted nay. The thing that the supposed hardcore left wanted them to do. Now, of course, that means that they were praised endlessly and people supported them and said, you know what, for all the disagreements we have, these guys were actually able to... You would think... You. This is one thing you gotta learn. You gotta stop pretending that the world is sane. We're all crazy, we're all stupid, everybody's an idiot. Of course, the fraud squad trended. Well, not trended, but like it got a decent number of people to go fraud squad. Now, interestingly, a lot of the people who said fraud squad were actually like K-High people, which is, I wonder if that's proof that fraud squad is a psyop. But of course, the same old stupid idiot subjects went on to be like, oh, this is actually a bad thing somehow. It's like, this proves, like, literally, at this point, yes, call me a squad simp, call me a squad stan, I don't care, because objectively, you made me this. The fact that you all went to, like, listen to this, Professor Zinkus, the biggest dumbass of them all, the squad voted no when it didn't matter, and the bill had the votes to pass. Everybody knew it. Pelosi had the vote count. Let's see them do it when it matters. They voted no. They voted no. They voted no. You wanted that, yes? And they voted no. Believe it or not, that's actually one of the more sane reactions of this. One of the biggest reactions is this. This isn't the biggest reaction, but this is one that I keep seeing, and I keep hating when this happens, because I keep telling people this, and they don't listen. And this isn't even this isn't even an ideological battle. This is literally just information. This is one of my biggest problems. I don't care about ideological differences. I care about information. Being wrong. I care about you just being wrong. I didn't start this channel for ideological sake. I did it to show information. One of the biggest things that I've seen people say is that the squad was split in this vote. I saw this in one tweet that the person deleted because they're baby bitch. But also, here's one. In a tweet that Pramila Jayapal said, she said said that she supported the bipartisan infrastructure bill. And here's one thing, it was hashtag fraud squad, hashtag career squad, hashtag baby bear squad, hashtag mama bear squad, hashtag bait and switch squad, hashtag establishment tool squad. And I sent this brilliant hashtag. Here's a brilliant hashtag they need to learn. Hashtag Pramila Jayapal is not part of the squad. The squad voted no. The squad was not split. The squad did not have multiple opinions. The squad voted no. The squad, and this is one of the big things. They do hashtag fraud squad, and they show a picture of a bunch of people. It's Pelosi's not part of the squad. Jayapal is not part of the squad. Khanna is not part of the squad. Pocan is not part of the squad. None of those are part of the squad. It is 6 people. The end. And here's a big kicker. people who were in Congress are in the squad, not Charles Booker's stupid socialist MMA. These people legitimately, you know what they've done? Like, this is actually a conspiracy theory. That would be hilarious if it's true. All these people like Nico House, like Socialist MMA, like Fiorella, Isabel, Sarcasm Stardust, Ryan Knight, all these stupid dumb fuck idiots. These guys, what they actually are AOC's biggest fans and are essentially trying to make it sure that she cannot be criticized. If that were true, if it was discovered tomorrow that was the case, I would not be surprised, because literally they have made AOC immune to criticism. I see any criticism of AOC now and just dismiss it automatically. Literally, I just dismiss it outright. If it's valid, it doesn't matter. These people have made like a stupid narrative that, because if they, and it wouldn't matter if it wasn't just completely dumb and wrong and everything in between. They are mad that the squad voted no on a bill they wanted them to vote no to. They made up AOC giving a blind eye to Joe Biden when she literally that day criticized Joe Biden for his immigration policies. They literally said AOC claimed that socialists are bad faith actors when she did not say those words once. AOC could tomorrow be revealed to be a killer rapist with video footage of her doing said act. And if Nico House tweets it, I will immediately go, this is obviously fake in some way. This is obviously not real. Because this is what they do. And I can't wait for that part to be taken out of context and then have them go, see, he admitted that he's a candidate stan when I'm using hyperbole to make a point. And the fact that people like this are like the forefront of left-wing like media on the internet ties directly into the main topic of this episode. I have not had the most perfect segue in my life, and I do not think it will ever happen again. So, for those who have no clue what I am talking about, essentially, like, we all know TYT, we all know Mikasa Sukasa, we all know BreadTube, we all know, like, what's another one? I guess Means TV, to a degree. Essentially, what these groups are like left-wing collectives in like the media sphere that are trying to like push for a left-wing media sphere. I know I just use those terms again, but bear with me. They're essentially like, and each of them were doing it in different ways. Like TYT was actually like essentially like MSNBC, like a left-wing version of MSNBC put on YouTube. Mikasa Sukasa was essentially ripping off TYT, but of course coming from like the Jimmy Dore perspective, like oh, TYT is too mainstream. Means TV, I don't think it was part of the like dumb rivalry of any sorts. They, especially because I think they were just doing it to be like explicitly socialist as opposed to like just broadly progressive. And even then they were also trying to like do it like as a socialist, like a commune thing. BreadTube is like infinitely different. So bear with me as I probably explain it. Like, BreadTube is not like an actual thing. Well, it kind of is, but I'll get to that in a bit. But essentially, BreadTube was just like a bunch of like collectively like left-leaning YouTubers that emerged out of the realms of the skeptic community. It should probably be a video on its own. Not even just that. Just like I had an idea for a video like that, but I scrapped it. But essentially, it's a video where I go over, like, the political leanings of the internet over its history. But essentially, BreadTube was a bunch of, like, left-wing YouTubers that emerged out of, like, the skeptic community sphere and, like, the alt-right sphere. Well, they didn't emerge from the alt-right sphere, but, like, the alt-right took over the internet and then, like, the lefties entered in. You know, there were people like ContraPoint, H Bomber Guy, Destiny, Philosophy Tube. Like, a lot of these people like that. There were left-wing YouTubers already. Like, I mean, of course, we had the social justice warrior phase of YouTube. I mean, that wasn't really a phase on YouTube. That was more like that wasn't really a phase. It was more like a it was the phase to be anti them. Like social justice warriors and again TYT, other ones like Kalkulinski, like left-wing YouTubers existed, and even like YouTubers that had left leanings, but like BreadTube was significantly different because it gave a rise of like new ways. See, because like left-wing media basically before like BreadTube was essentially just news. Like, it was literally just, like, news and commentary. Either commented on the news or you commented on, like, social issues. Sometimes you would get praise and sometimes you would be called a social justice warrior. In fact, we even had, like, people fighting in this sphere. Like, Al Kalinske was anti-SJW. TJ Kirk was anti-SJW. But then there was also that, like, the anti-SJWs eventually just became far-right. And a lot of the left-wing anti-SJWs either just went far-right or joined with BreadTube. Now, the thing about BreadTube, that was the big appeal of BreadTube, was very similar to the appeal of the skeptic community of yesteryear. The appeal of BreadTube was that it was a completely decentralized movement. It wasn't like TYT or Mikasa Sukasa, where people set out to try and build this big collective of YouTubers. It wasn't a multi-channel network. It was a group of people that individually came of their own volition and did YouTube videos, and the brilliant part about it was that they actually all did very different things. Some people would do video game commentary, some would do let's plays, some would talk about like media and how that could influence politics. Some people just flat out gave like philosophy tubes, and a lot of them did it in like new and extravagant ways. And another thing is that not all these people were alike. Like, for example, Destiny. He is not considered a leftist anymore, but in BreadTube days, he was considered leftist because he was literally just like essentially, he was what he is, like left liberal at best. But then again, he wasn't also that liked because he took down the big boy JonTron. Oh no. Wait, I just realized, in my video where I talk about Destiny, I think I literally mentioned that I don't like him because he hated on JonTron, because I liked JonTron at the time. I still kind of like JonTron, but it's like, yeah, JonTron 100% deserved it, and he still deserves it. I basically unfollowed him from any socials that I was following him on, except for, like, YouTube, because it's like, maybe I did unsub from him on YouTube. Maybe I will. I don't know. But that's a different story. That's not here nor there. Ooh, I just realized. That could be an interesting thoughts on, but again, that's neither here nor there. But back to BreadTube, that was he was like a left lib at most, but then there were other people who were like straight up communists. And when I say communists, I mean like literally all varieties, like ancoms and tankies. But that was essentially what this group was. They were the broad sphere, but they weren't like an individual collective. There was an attempt to try and make BreadTube like an actual thing by detractors and by supporters of BreadTube, but essentially at this point it hasn't really panned out. And while yes, BreadTube in itself was fine and great and wonderful, that last part kind of is an issue. You see, one problem, like especially considering just like how the left is, we all fight, we all bicker, we all do a bunch of stuff that we're not proud of. A lot of drama, a lot of shenanigans, blah, blah, blah. And while a decentralized, like, big sphere of YouTube influence is good, for many reasons, it's not enough. Now, let me explain for a couple of reasons why it wasn't necessarily enough. One, again, with all the differences in opinion and stuff, there's a lot of bickering, so it's a little hard for LeftTube to unite. Like, BreadTube, LeftTube, whatever you want to call it, it can't necessarily unite in a way. And we can't even do like a multi-tendency like sort of thing where it's like, yes, we all have differences, but we all agree on the end goal. So it's like we all agree on the basic principles. So it's like, who cares about like the little tiny details? We can't even do that because our ideologies have essentially shifted us to be not just like our ideologies and upbringings all across the world have not only shifted us to be like we hate each other on a personal basis, really. Like, there are LeftTubers who legitimately, like, despise each other as human beings. And I know this because I despise a lot of LeftTubers as human beings. And by LeftTubers, I don't even mean LeftTubers. I'm talking about, like, one specific person specifically. You know who you are. But they're, like for example, Thought Slime hates Vosh and Xanderhall. Destiny has basically been excommunicated from BreadTube. There's that drama of like, oh, we're the video essayists, and we hate Debate Bros because Debate Bros and streamers don't do that good content. Like, instead of acknowledging and respecting each other's differences, we instead just go, we separate ourselves, we segregate ourselves, for lack of a better term. There was actually a better term for that, and I used that literally just 2 seconds ago, but I used the second term anyways to trigger your ears. Ideologies and personalities just don't mesh. The second reason that it hasn't helped is very simple. It's like capitalism in a way. Ironic that we use capitalism to talk about like these internet guys, but not even the internet guys. It's like these capitalism talk about these socialists. But let me explain. BreadTube helped the first wave and the pre-BreadTube YouTubers like Kyle Kalinske, Mike Figueredo, Humanist Report, all those like pre-existing left-wing YouTubers. They got a boost thanks to BreadTube. And the first class and like maybe second class of like BreadTubers like Hassan Piker, Vosh, freaking like I say Vosh because Vosh is like I think like technically in the second class, not the first class of BreadTube. You know, Xanderhall, like these type of people, like they shot up to the top really fast. But I hate to make this about me, but people like me get like a lot of these newer left tubers, we get left in the dust. And due to the previous drama stuff that I just mentioned, we essentially are forced not even to develop our own identities. We are forced to develop identities that are based on other people's identities. Like people like Xanderhall have to mimic people like Vosh. He's essentially part of the Vosh clique. Then there are people who are like in the Thought Slime clique. And you can't say I like Thought Slime and I like Xanderhall because those two people really hate each other. We are forced to essentially be the smaller versions of our favorite left-tubers. And a good example of this literally comes from a lot of like class 3 left-tubers. Like I think literally it's like class 1 was like Destiny and ContraPoints and Philosophy Tube. And then class 2 was like Vosh, Thought Slime, Surfs, I think. Then class 3 is like Progressive Voice. I don't even think that counts. Like Progressive Voice, Xanderhall, and people like I hate to use these guys as examples because one of them I hate. And that ties into the point previously. See, Tom Barry of We Are the New Left, who's literally just a ripoff of Jimmy Dore, and as I mentioned before, Progressive Voice, literally a ripoff of Kyle Kalinske and Cenk Uygur. Who did I mention? Xanderhall, ripoff of Vosh. I know he says he's ripoff of Destiny, but bear with me. Vanguard is essentially sort of like they try to do their own thing, but essentially they are just mimicking the Jimmy Dore anti-AOC left crowd. And even me, I essentially took the podcast format from Kyle Kalinske because he was the left tuber that I liked, talking about the news and stuff. And then I took the main series video format and like ripped it off of Mr. Beat. Now, to a degree, that is not that bad if you end up eventually getting your own style. And some people are able to do that, like me, and some other people do not. And there really is a lot of hesitancy with LeftTube to help each other out. Like, I mean, Xanderhall ain't watching this show. I keep bringing up Xanderhall. I don't know why Xanderhall is on my mind. Maybe it's because he's my age and he's literally has way more fame and power and money than me. But that ties into my point. Like, Xanderhall ain't shouting me out or anybody else out. They're, like, these bigger channels are not helping build the left-wing media they claim to want to build. Like, at least for a lot of these guys, they say they want to build, like, a broad left, like, sphere where, like, they want the left to build and grow and, like, all this stuff. But they don't want to help smaller creators. Like, Vosh isn't watching me and giving me a shout-out. I'm not being invited to the Hippy Dippy Network. And I'm not even, like, again, and I use me as an example because I'm right here, but drop me, put another, like, really small creator, like Aaron Green or Niall Elcom or any of these other people, put them in those shoes, they're not getting shout-outs either. And that can be greatly helped with a sort of new LeftTube. Now, I bring this up, but it's like, really, I don't necessarily know what I would call this, because it's like I use the name RoseTube just because I really like the idea, like bread, roses, I get it, RoseTube, and rose is like a common socialist symbol, but like RoseTube, I don't even know like what it would be. Like I'll like thinking about it like as a rival to TYT and Mikasa Tsukasa, that would help in the sense that we have a voice that like can counteract those two in their own way. Like the problems with TYT are not necessarily the problems with Mikasa Tsukasa. Mikasa Tsukasa is like cozying up to right wingers, or like the Fred Hampton leftists or anything of the sort. And TYT's, their problem is like they're too mainstream and too corporate and stuff, even though it's like not as bad as I remember it being when I was younger. And it would help like build smaller channels, you know, because like this is the truth. Like, listen to me. This is what happens. This is how you grow a channel. You have to appear on other people's shows. You have to appear on your show. They have to shout you out. You have to shout them out. You have to do all this stuff to grow their channels. And essentially, that's how you grow channels. That is literally how you grow channels. You network. What better way to do it would than through an actual like collective. Now, of course, I understand like there are a lot of people in my sphere that don't necessarily, they can't do this. They don't necessarily like want to do this. I mean, it's not even necessarily that they don't want to do this. I'm pretty sure if I like said this idea to other people, they'd probably be on board with the idea. And I know because I've actually been on the idea, like I've been on the cusp of an idea similar to this. But of course, there are a lot of people like they can't risk it, I guess, to lack of a better word, especially considering like there's a lot of paperwork involved in this. So I'm not necessarily like 100% like, because again, this is more of just an idea or like a broad spectrum of ideas. It would be like a new bread tube of new YouTubers. That's why it's called RoseTube. It's not that we're anti-bread tube. It's that we are coincided this. Like, we are alongside them. We are just a different brand. Especially considering we're now kind of getting to a generation that will have kind of grown up with a little bit of BreadTube. Like, BreadTube started when I was, like, 17, I think? And I'm 21 now, so I've literally been around with them for a while. Granted, it's not like I've grown up with them, but it's like, eventually we're going to get into a generation where there are people who will have grown up watching Vosh. There'll be people who have grown up watching ContraPoints, watching Lindsay Ellis. Technically, I already have grown up watching Lindsay Ellis, but that was because she was the nostalgia chick. She does not look fondly upon that. But at the end of the day, again, like, I mean, I say all this, I explain all these issues, but am I gonna, like, put up an LLC for RoseTube? Am I gonna start a RoseTube office? Am I gonna start, like, a RoseTube worker co-op? Probably not, but it's an idea. It is a thought process, and for a lot of reasons, I do like that idea. And again, one thing, like, I mean, this is probably the last thing I'm gonna say before I close out the episode, but like, it's probably just because like I grew up on the idea of like when you want to start a YouTube channel, when you want to be part of a broader network. You know, the AVGN was part of Screw Attack. You know, people were part of the Fred Radio Network. People were part of the Machinima Network. Granted, a lot of those networks turned out to be crap. And, you know, TYT, all this other Mikasa Tsukasa crap. But it's just generally the idea of being in a collective is, it sounds like a good idea, especially considering, you know, the sphere that I've chosen to put my content on. Especially considering, like, I mean, again, I'll toot my own horn. My content is definitely different than a lot of other people on LeftTube's content. So maybe it would be best to have that content available to other people. It's kind of why when I originally started, I was more open. I mean, it was kind of like I was more open to the idea of like going on other people's shows, and I'm still open to that. And that's why I even outright rejected the notion of like, oh, take this content and put it on your channel. No, it's like I'm gonna try and direct people to your channel from my channel. I don't want to post a video you made on my channel and then take all the views and stuff away from you. But essentially, that's all the rambling that I have on that topic. Just the idea of a new LeftTube collective sounds like a good idea. And if you want any ideas on who I'd like to be part of this, well, check out the channel tab. You could exclude Mr. Beat, I guess, because he's not a leftist, so I don't think he'd be on board with that. Well, I mean, unless he wants to be the guy who gives us all the money and stuff, and in that case, he can come on board as long as he wants. It's the least I can do after he put my name in a book. Anyways, thanks for watching this video. Be sure to like, comment, subscribe, and click that bell to notify when a future video of mine comes out. And if you're interested in more content from me, you can go to my website, follow me on Twitter, join my Discord, check out my articles on the Independent Political Board, or consider supporting me on Patreon.